Control what you can, accept what you can't. This simple yet profound wisdom from Marcus Aurelius has guided warriors, leaders, and visionaries for centuries. But what if I told you this ancient philosophy holds the key to unlocking a version of yourself so resilient, so unshakable, that no setback could ever derail your purpose? Imagine standing firm like a titan amidst life's chaos, not because your path is easy, but because you've mastered the art of turning obstacles into fuel. That's the power of Stoic mastery. It's not about suppressing emotion or enduring suffering silently. It's about rewriting your story from the inside out, forging a mindset that sees every challenge as raw material for greatness. Think about the last time life knocked you down. Maybe it was a missed opportunity, a failure that stung, or a moment when doubt crept in. Now, picture this. What if those very moments were secretly shaping you for something extraordinary? The Stoics believed that our struggles aren't roadblocks, they're the chisels sculpting our character. This video isn't just about ancient quotes or abstract ideas. It's a practical blueprint for how you can harness Stoic principles to build unbreakable focus, clarity, and resilience. We'll dive into the same strategies that transformed Roman emperors, modern entrepreneurs, and everyday people into architects of their destiny. So, how do you rise as a titan in a world that constantly tests your limits? It starts with a choice to see yourself not as a victim of circumstance, but as the author of your comeback. Whether you're facing a personal crisis, professional stagnation, or simply feeling lost, Stoicism offers tools to reclaim your narrative. By the end of this journey, you'll have more than just motivation. You'll have a battle-tested framework to turn adversity into advantage. Ready to rewrite your success story? Let's begin. Epictetus once drew a line in the sand that changes everything. Some things are within our power, while others are not. That single idea is the bedrock of Stoic resilience, the ability to separate what you can influence from what you must accept. Picture a ship's captain. They can't control the storm, but they can adjust the sails. That's the Stoic mindset in action, focusing your energy where it actually matters. Seneca put it best when he said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." What if every obstacle you face isn't a barrier but a gym for your character? Take two people facing the same setback, a job rejection. The average person might spiral into self-doubt, obsessing over the unfairness of it all. But someone practicing Stoicism, they'd ask, what part of this can I own? Maybe it's refining their skills or networking more strategically. They'd see the rejection as data, not destiny. This shift isn't about denial, it's about empowerment. When you stop wasting effort on what's outside your control, you unlock a superhuman focus on what you can change. Here's the challenge. Pick one area of your life where frustration keeps bubbling up. Is it a toxic relationship, a stalled career, or maybe financial stress? Now grab a mental highlighter and mark what's truly yours to influence. The Stoics called this the art of acquiescence, not passive surrender, but strategic clarity. Because when you stop fighting unwinnable battles, you free up energy to conquer the ones that matter. That's how ordinary people start thinking and acting like titans. Nietzsche called it Amor Fati, the love of fate. But this fiery idea wasn't just his. Centuries earlier, the Stoics were already living it, teaching that true power comes not from resisting life's twists, but from embracing them like a sculptor embraces raw marble. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Think about that for a second. Every obstacle, every disappointment, every detour, they're not just hurdles to overcome. They're the exact tools you need to build the life you want. Consider Thomas Edison's lab burning to the ground at 67 years old. Flames consumed decades of research, prototypes, and notes. Most would see ruin, but Edison, he gathered his team that very night and said, "We just cleared out a lot of old mistakes. Now we can start fresh." Within weeks, he revolutionized the phonograph. That's Amor Fati in action, seeing destruction not as an ending, but as the perfect beginning. Here's the radical truth the Stoics understood. When you stop fighting reality and start working with it, you unlock a hidden kind of momentum. A business fails, that's tuition for your next venture. A relationship ends, that's space for someone who aligns with the person you're becoming. Even suffering has a purpose. It's the fire that tempers your resolve. The key isn't to avoid hardship, but to use it. So let's put this to the test right now. Think of one recent setback, a rejection, a loss, a plan that fell apart. Now ask yourself, what if this exact situation was custom designed to strengthen a weakness you didn't know you had? Maybe that missed promotion forces you to build new skills. Maybe that betrayal teaches you to trust your instincts. The moment you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What's this here to teach me?" that's when you stop being at the mercy of fate and start shaping it. This isn't about blind optimism. It's about strategic acceptance. The Stoics didn't smile through pain. They leaned into it, mined it for wisdom, and came out stronger. Your greatest power lies not in controlling every outcome, but in extracting value from every outcome. That's how ordinary people transform into titans, by loving the very things that were meant to break them. What if your biggest problem is just a story you're telling yourself? The Stoics called this the discipline of perception, the art of stripping away emotional noise to see reality with ruthless clarity. Epictetus put it bluntly, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Think about that. The same event, a layoff, a betrayal, a failure, can destroy one person while becoming fuel for another. The difference isn't the circumstance, it's the lens through which they view it. Take a founder whose startup collapses. Most would see disaster, sleepless nights, replaying mistakes, questioning their worth. But someone trained in Stoic perception, they dissect the failure like a scientist. What facts are undeniable? The business ran out of cash, the market shifted. Those are neutral truths. The agony comes from the layers we add. I'm a fraud. I'll never recover. The Stoics teach us to catch those runaway judgments and ask, is this thought useful? Does it help me move forward? If not, discard it like outdated code. Here's the modern twist. Neuroscience confirms this ancient wisdom. When we fixate on negative narratives, our brains reinforce those pathways like well-worn trails. But the moment we reframe, this isn't the end, it's feedback. We literally rewire our minds. A tech CEO who lost everything in the dot-com crash told me, that failure was my MBA. It taught me more about resilience than any success could. That's Stoic perception in action, transforming rubble into building materials. So try this now. Grab a current worry, maybe a conflict at work or financial pressure. Write down the bare facts, no embellishments. Then notice the stories you've attached. My boss hates me. I'll never get ahead. Now imagine handing those facts to a Stoic sage. How would they interpret them? Often, you'll find the weight comes not from the event, but from the meaning you assigned. When you change the narrative, you change your power. This isn't about positive thinking, it's about precise thinking. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to vent emotions, but to correct distortions. Strip away the legend that encrusts it. He wrote, that's your challenge today, to see the world not as your fears paint it, but as it truly is. Because when you master perception, you stop being a passenger to your emotions and start becoming the pilot of your destiny. The ancient Stoics didn't just wait for adversity to strike. They trained for it like mental athletes, turning their minds into unshakable fortresses long before disaster knocked. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, wasn't about pessimism or fear-mongering. It was about rehearsing life's toughest moments with the calm precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Seneca captured its power perfectly. He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand. Imagine standing in a storm you've already weathered 100 times in your mind. That's the secret, not avoiding fear, but disarming it through preparation. Think of it like a fire drill. No one panics during practice because the goal isn't to simulate chaos, it's to embed calm, automatic responses. When a real crisis hits, muscle memory takes over. The Stoics applied this same logic to life's uncertainties. They'd mentally walk through losing a job, facing illness, or even betrayal, not to dwell on misery, but to ask, if this happens, what's my move? By stripping away the element of surprise, they transformed dread into readiness. Here's how you can apply this today. Picture a challenge you're avoiding, a difficult conversation, a financial risk, a potential failure. Now close your eyes and play it out in vivid detail. What's the worst that could happen? How would you respond? Maybe you'd pivot to a new opportunity, lean on your support network, or discover reserves of strength you didn't know you had. This mental rehearsal isn't about inviting disaster. It's about proving to yourself that you can handle it. Consider the CEO who visualizes market crashes during boom times, or the athlete who imagines losing the lead before stepping onto the field. They're not manifesting failure, they're building antifragility. The Stoics knew something modern psychology confirms. When you confront feared scenarios head-on, they lose their fangs. Fear thrives in the unknown but withers under examination. So here's your challenge. Pick one future scenario that's been weighing on you. Spend 5 minutes today mentally navigating it, not as a victim but as a problem solver. What resources would you activate? What lessons could it teach? This isn't worry, it's strategy. Because when you've already faced the storm in your mind, the real thing feels like just another drill. And that's how ordinary people develop the courage of titans. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own." That piercing observation cuts to the heart of Stoic detachment, the liberating art of rendering external judgments powerless over your inner world. Imagine standing in a crowded room where voices clamor with approval or disdain, and yet you remain as undisturbed as a mountain in the wind. This isn't arrogance or apathy. It's the quiet confidence of someone who measures their worth by an internal compass, not the fickle applause of others. Epictetus took this further with a brutal truth. If someone handed your body over to just any passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you, allowing it to be troubled and confused. Think about that. We guard our physical possessions fiercely, but often surrender our peace to strangers' words. The Stoics realized early what modern psychology now confirms. The more we outsource our self-worth to external validation, the more fragile we become. Consider two leaders facing criticism. The first obsesses over every negative comment, tweaking decisions to win over detractors. The second listens, evaluates, but remains anchored to their principles. History remembers the latter. Figures like Lincoln or Mandela, who weathered torrents of scorn without losing their moral footing. Detachment here isn't about ignoring feedback, it's about filtering it through wisdom, not insecurity. Here's the paradox: when you stop needing praise, you become worthy of it. Artists creating for trends burn out, those creating from conviction endure. A startup chasing investor approval often loses its soul. while one solving real problems attracts lasting support. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, investing energy only where you have sovereignty. Your effort, yours the outcome, not yours, so here's your challenge. Grab a pen and finish this sentence. I've been letting have too much power over how I feel about myself. Is it a boss's opinion, social media likes, a parent's expectations? Now, imagine cutting that cord, not with resentment, but with the calm clarity of someone who knows their value isn't up for debate. Because when you stop renting space in your mind to others' judgments, you reclaim the one thing no one can take: your freedom. If today were your last day, what would you stop tolerating? What petty grievances would suddenly seem meaningless? The Stoics called this Memento Mori, the practice of remembering death, not to dwell in fear, but to ignite urgency in how you live. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid fixation. It was the ultimate prioritization tool. When you internalize that time is your only non-renewable resource, everything sharpens into focus. Consider the entrepreneur who survived a car crash and immediately cut all passive-aggressive meetings from his calendar. Or the artist who started painting daily after her cancer scare, realizing approval mattered less than expression. Near-death experiences have a way of burning away the trivial. But here's the radical insight: you don't need a brush with mortality to access that clarity. The Stoics practiced this daily, using death as a mirror to reflect their truest priorities. Imagine holding two lists. One contains everything that truly matters to you: deep relationships, meaningful work, personal growth. The other is filled with distractions, grudges you nurse, obligations you resent, endless scrolling. Memento Mori asks a simple question: which list would dominate if you knew your time was limited? The answer reveals where you're investing your life energy and where you're leaking it. This week, try a Stoic experiment. Eliminate one activity that drains more value than it creates. Maybe it's that weekly gossip session disguised as networking, or the hour lost to comparing yourself online. Replace it with something that aligns with your deepest values: a handwritten letter, focused work on your passion project, or simply being fully present with someone you love. Death isn't waiting in some distant future, it's sitting patiently in every moment you waste. The awareness of it isn't meant to frighten you, it's here to wake you up. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start living like today counts, because it does. A single breath can rewrite an entire moment. That fragile space between what happens to you and how you respond is where Stoic mastery lies. Picture this: someone cut you off in traffic, your boss dismisses your idea in a meeting, or a loved one says something that stings. In that instant, there's a fork in the road. One path leads to reaction, heated words, clenched fists, regret. The other, response measured, intentional, powerful. The difference isn't time, it's the deliberate pause you insert, like a Stoic hitting the mental brakes. Seneca warned that anger is temporary madness, a fire that burns the hand of the one who carries it. But here's the secret: that pause isn't passive. It's where your wisdom takes the wheel. Ancient warriors trained for this. Before battle, Roman generals would literally step back, inhale, and ask, "Is this emotion serving my mission?" Modern neuroscience confirms their instinct. Just 6 seconds of pause lets your prefrontal cortex override your amygdala's panic signals. Try it now. Count slowly to 10 the next time frustration flares. But here's the Stoic twist: don't just count. Use those seconds to ask 2 questions. What part of this can I control? And what would my best self do right now? That pause becomes a laboratory for transformation. Imagine a CEO in a high-stakes negotiation. A rival insults her company's flagship product. Her face flushes, muscles tense, classic fight or flight. But instead of firing back, she takes a sip of water, letting the silence stretch for 3 purposeful breaths. In that space, she realizes reacting would give the insult power. So she smiles. Interesting perspective. Let's talk data instead. The room's energy shifts. She didn't suppress emotion. She channeled it strategically. That's the Stoic pause in action, turning volatility into leverage. Your challenge today: pick one interaction where you'd normally react on autopilot, a snippy text, a coworker's backhanded compliment. When it happens, physically pause, set down your phone, walk to the window, even mutter, "Let me think about that." Use the gap to separate the event from your story about it. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Most conflicts aren't lost in the heat of battle, they're lost in the first spark, when reaction outpaces reason. Master the pause and you master the game. When was the last time you chose discomfort? Not the kind life forces upon you, the traffic jam, the delayed flight, the burnt toast, but the kind you deliberately invite, like stepping into an ice-cold shower or skipping a meal when you could easily eat. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, and they didn't just recommend it, they lived it. Epictetus, who slept on a hard floor despite owning a bed, put it bluntly: practice hunger, thirst, and cold so you may acquire courage. This wasn't about masochism or deprivation for its own sake. It was about forging resilience through controlled exposure, like a blacksmith tempering steel. Think of your comfort zone as a muscle. If you never stretch it, it atrophies. But when you intentionally push its limits, you don't just adapt, you grow stronger than the challenge itself. That's the essence of antifragility, a concept popularized by modern thinker Nassim Taleb, but deeply rooted in Stoic practice. Systems that are antifragile don't merely withstand shocks, they thrive because of them. Your mind works the same way. Every time you voluntarily endure small hardships, whether it's waking up an hour earlier, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or sitting with boredom instead of reaching for your phone, you're training your resilience muscle for life's inevitable storms. Consider the Navy SEALs' infamous 40% rule. During Hell Week, recruits learn that when their minds scream they're exhausted, they've typically only tapped 40% of their actual capacity. The Stoics discovered this truth centuries earlier through practices like fasting or wearing thin cloaks in winter. By routinely testing their limits, they proved to themselves that discomfort was often just a story their bodies told, one they could rewrite through repetition. Here's the modern twist: you don't need to sleep on stone floors to practice this. Start small. Take a cold shower tomorrow morning, not for 5 seconds, but long enough for your breath to steady and your focus to sharpen. Or try a digital fast, 12 hours without checking social media, noticing how your mind rebels before settling into deeper clarity. These aren't punishments, they're experiments in self-mastery. Each time you choose discomfort over convenience, you're depositing resilience points into your psychological bank account. So here's your challenge today: pick one voluntary hardship. Maybe it's walking in the rain without complaining, having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or working through lunch to finish a project. Notice the voice that says, "This is unnecessary, why suffer?" That's the comfort illusion talking. The Stoics knew a secret: when you willingly face small pains, big ones lose their sting. Because true freedom isn't found in avoiding hardship, it's found in knowing you can handle far more than you think. Astronauts returning from space often describe the overview effect, that profound shift in perspective when gazing down at Earth from orbit. Wars, borders, and personal grudges shrink into insignificance against the backdrop of our tiny blue planet suspended in infinite blackness. Marcus Aurelius practiced this mental zoom out centuries before spaceflight, writing, Think of the substance of the whole, what a speck you are in comparison. This is the Stoic view from above technique, a way to instantly recalibrate what truly matters by seeing your life from cosmic altitude. Picture yourself floating above your city right now. That office argument over a missed deadline, from here it looks like two ants squabbling over a crumb. That social media feud, a brief spark in the darkness. Aurelius would remind us that even the grandest human empires, Rome itself, are now just paragraphs in history books. Think of the rapidity with which all things vanish, he wrote. The bodies and souls themselves, the memories of them, like smoke in the air. This isn't meant to diminish your struggles, but to free you from their false gravity. Take a workplace conflict where tensions feel unbearable. Now imagine viewing it from 1 year in the future. Will you remember who said what in that meeting? Or will it blur into the countless forgotten skirmishes that seemed world-ending in the moment? A CEO client once told me about a months-long executive team feud over office seating arrangements. 6 months later, they'd moved buildings. The crisis became a laughingstock story. That's the power of temporal perspective. It reveals most battles as temporary theater. Here's how to practice this today. Close your eyes and project yourself 10 years forward. Look back at your current challenge, that financial strain, relationship strain, or career uncertainty. From that vantage point, ask, what lessons did this teach me? How did it shape who I became? Often, you'll realize today's catastrophes were pivot points, not dead ends. The Stoics called this preliving, experiencing the future now to drain present anxieties of their power. This perspective isn't about dismissing real pain. It's about distinguishing between thunderstorms and the changing of seasons. One will drench you momentarily, the other transforms the landscape. When you learn to rise above the daily weather of emotions and see the larger patterns, you stop mistaking turbulence for the entire flight. That's how Titans keep their footing, not by avoiding storms, but by remembering they're flying above them. Marcus Aurelius never intended his private journal to be read by millions. What we now call meditations was simply his nightly ritual, an emperor stripping away the day's chaos to converse with his own soul. That leather-bound notebook became his secret weapon, transforming battlefield tents and palace corridors into classrooms for self-mastery. The Stoics didn't journal to vent or reminisce. They wielded ink like a sculptor's chisel, shaping raw experience into wisdom. Seneca insisted we should interrogate each day before sleep. What weakness did I correct? Where did I stumble? Imagine ending every evening not with mindless scrolling, but with this deliberate excavation of your own growth. The Stoic journal follows 3 deliberate movements: gratitude, autopsy, and preparation. First, you anchor yourself with what's good. Not vague, I'm thankful for health platitudes, but razor-specific appreciations. The barista who remembered your order, the afternoon light through your window. This isn't positivity for its own sake. It's training your mind to spot gold in ordinary moments. Next comes the forensic review. Here's where most modern journaling fails. We either skip the hard questions or drown in self-flagellation. The Stoic method is surgical. When did I react instead of respond today? What fear disguised itself as anger? Finally, you script tomorrow's intentions. Not goals like have a productive meeting, but virtues. I'll listen with patience when tensions rise. Consider the tech founder who credits her journal for navigating a 75% staff reduction. Each night, she'd write 1 line of gratitude. The engineering lead stayed late voluntarily. One hard truth: I postponed layoffs out of guilt, worsening the crisis. And one commitment: tomorrow, I'll explain decisions with clarity, not apology. Within months, her remaining team described her as unshakably present, a direct result of those nightly reckonings. Here's your invitation tonight. Grab any notebook, even your phone's notes app. Start with one sentence for each Stoic pillar. Name one concrete thing you're grateful for today: the smell of rain, your kids' laugh. Identify one moment you'd handle differently with Stoic lenses, that snapped reply to your partner. Then script one intention for tomorrow, not as an outcome, close the deal, but as a virtue. I'll negotiate with integrity, not desperation. This isn't about volume, it's about velocity. Those few lines, written consistently, become the whetstone that sharpens your character over time. The blank page doesn't judge, it reflects. And in that reflection, you'll begin to see the Titan taking shape. Admiral James Stockdale's plane was shot down over Vietnam in 1965, plunging him into 7 years of torture and solitary confinement. Yet when asked who struggled most in those prison camps, he gave a startling answer: the optimists. They kept believing they'd be freed by Christmas, then Easter, then Thanksgiving. Each broken deadline shattered their spirit further. Stockdale survived by embracing a different approach, one he credited to his study of Epictetus. You must never confuse the faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. That razor-sharp mindset, seeing obstacles not as roadblocks but as the very path forward, is what the Stoics called "the obstacle is the way." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The fire that melts wax tempers steel." Think about that alchemy. The same heat that destroys one material forges another into something unbreakable. Your greatest frustrations right now, the stalled project, the financial strain, the personal setback, aren't exceptions to your success story. They're the raw materials of it. Consider how pressure transforms coal into diamonds, or how oysters secrete nacre around irritants to create pearls. Nature's blueprint is clear. Discomfort isn't the enemy of growth, it's the catalyst. Take the founder whose first startup collapsed after burning through millions. Instead of scripting a defeat narrative, he dissected the wreckage like an archaeologist. The failure revealed his blind spots: poor cash flow management, yes, but more importantly, a tendency to equate hustle with strategy. His next venture addressed those gaps precisely, scaling to 10 times the revenue in half the time. That pivot wasn't luck, it was applied Stoicism. He'd internalized Seneca's insight. Difficulties reveal genius, ease conceals it. Here's how to practice this today. Grab paper and divide it into 2 columns. In the first, list a current obstacle, maybe a client rejection or a skill gap. In the second, answer: what is this situation forcing me to develop? A missed promotion might reveal leadership qualities you've neglected. A creative block could signal the need for deeper research. The Stoics didn't just endure hardships, they reverse-engineered them. Your obstacle isn't in the way, it is the way. The moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this happening to teach me?" you stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming an architect of resilience. Tonight, try Stockdale's ritual. Before sleep, name one challenge that feels immovable. Then, identify 3 ways it's secretly strengthening you, not as wishful thinking, but as strategic reframing. Maybe that difficult colleague is training your patience. That financial constraint is sharpening your creativity. The Stoics knew a truth modern science confirms: the stories we tell about our struggles determine whether they break us or build us. So tell better stories, because titans aren't made in comfort, they're forged in the fire of challenges they dared to embrace. What if 90% of your stress comes from things you can't change? The referee's call, the traffic jam, the market crash, none of these respond to your frustration. Yet how often do we drain our energy fighting battles we were never equipped to win? Epictetus drew a boundary 2,000 years ago that still holds revolutionary power. Some things are in our control while others are not. The difference between exhaustion and unstoppable focus comes down to one skill: relentlessly channeling your effort where it actually moves the needle. Picture an Olympic sprinter crouched in the blocks. She can't control the competitor in lane 4, the judge's reaction time, or the weather. But her focus narrows to what's hers, exploding off the mark, driving her knees, controlling her breath. That's the Titan's mindset, treating everything outside her influence as background noise. The Stoics visualize this as two concentric circles. The inner circle holds your opinions, efforts, and desires, your sovereign territory. The outer ring contains everything else: other people's actions, external events, even your own body's limitations. Crossing that boundary is how we leak power. Consider a startup founder during a funding drought. She wastes months agonizing over investor rejections until she stumbles on Marcus Aurelius's journal. You have power over your mind, not outside events. That sparks a pivot. She stops refreshing her inbox and starts refining her pitch, building prototypes, and nurturing her network. Within weeks, momentum shifts. Not because the market changed, but because she redirected energy from what she couldn't fix to what she could. Here's your challenge. Grab a sheet of paper and draw your own circles. In the center, list what's truly yours to command: your preparation, your attitude, your daily habits. Outside it, jot down current stressors: a micromanaging boss, a volatile stock, a relative's criticism. Now physically cross out the outer ring. That's not surrender, it's strategic liberation. Every minute spent fretting over those crossed out items steals time from where you're truly powerful. The Stoics weren't suggesting we ignore external challenges. They were teaching us to engage with them differently. When a storm hits, a sailor doesn't rage against the wind. She adjusts the sails. Your frustration with traffic won't clear the road, but leaving earlier might. That critical coworker won't transform overnight, but your response to them can. This isn't passivity, it's precision. The Titan's strength lies not in controlling the world, but in mastering where they place their attention. Tonight, try this ritual. Review your day and note 3 moments where you invested energy in the uncontrollable. Maybe you obsessed over a stranger's comment online or stressed about a decision that wasn't yours to make. Now, rewrite those scenes. How would your best self have directed that effort? Over time, this practice rewires your focus like a muscle. Because when you stop drowning in the waves you can't stop, you start steering toward the horizon you choose. Seneca once cut through the illusion of courage with 9 razor-sharp words. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The Stoics didn't wait for fear to vanish before acting. They treated it like bad weather, something to move through rather than avoid. Their secret weapon, reason. While others saw fear as a stop sign, Stoics saw it as a navigation tool, using logic to separate genuine threats from mental phantoms. Marcus Aurelius put steel in this approach with his command: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready, now. Consider how firefighters train. They don't eliminate their biological fear response. They override it with practiced motions. The Stoics did the same mentally. When facing public ridicule, Epictetus would ask, what evidence proves their opinion matters? Confronting financial loss, Seneca would calculate worst-case scenarios to prove survival was possible. This wasn't suppression, it was strategic dismantling of fear's power through cold, hard examination. Take the modern whistleblower who exposes corruption knowing careers could collapse. Their courage doesn't come from certainty, it comes from valuing truth over comfort. Like the Stoic merchant who sailed during storm season because the mission outweighed the risk, they act not because fear disappears, but because purpose outweighs it. Your turn. Identify one fear that's been whispering, not yet, in your ear: the difficult conversation you're avoiding, the career leap that terrifies you, the vulnerability required to mend a relationship. Now apply the Stoic triage. First, distinguish real danger from imagined catastrophe. Second, ask what your best self would do if fear weren't a factor. Third, take one action today that proves to your nervous system that discomfort isn't fatal. Courage isn't a feeling you wait for, it's a decision you make, then reinforce through motion. Every Titanic life was built on moments someone chose to tremble forward anyway. Marcus Aurelius envisioned the mind as an inner citadel, a fortress so impregnable that even when barbarians storm the gates, the core remains untouched. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's the Stoic secret to weathering any storm, building an inviolable sanctuary within, where external chaos can't dictate your peace. Picture a medieval castle under siege. Arrows may fly over the walls, but deep in the keep, the ruler sits undisturbed, strategizing rather than panicking. Your mind works the same way. The outer walls, your circumstances, others' opinions, even physical discomfort, may be battered, but the inner chamber remains yours to command. Epictetus drove this home with unshakable logic. No one can harm the good man's mind, not even Zeus. Not because life won't try, but because the Stoic mind refuses to register insults, setbacks, or even physical pain as true harm. Consider James Stockdale again, the Navy pilot imprisoned in Vietnam. Beaten daily, locked in solitary, he survived by retreating to his inner citadel. In his memoir, he describes reciting Stoic principles like mantras. "They can chain my body, but my thoughts are free." That mental discipline didn't just preserve his sanity, it turned his cell into a classroom where he emerged wiser than his captors. Here's how to construct your own fortress. Start with the Stoic pause, that breath between stimulus and response. When chaos erupts, visualize stepping behind the thick walls of your citadel. From there, ask, what part of this is truly mine to control? A client screams unjust criticism. That's noise outside the gates, your analysis of their feedback and your choice of response. That's the council table inside where decisions are made. The more you practice this mental retreat, the more automatic it becomes. Try this tonight. Close your eyes and imagine your inner sanctuary in vivid detail. Is it a stone tower with a hearth, a sunlit library? Stockdale pictured his grandfather's farmhouse porch. Now identify 3 current stressors: a work conflict, financial worry, a relationship strain. Mentally place each outside the citadel walls, then step inside. Feel the difference. That space between external events and your interpretation is where Stoic freedom lies. Because when you stop letting the world's chaos become your inner reality, you gain something no one can take: the unshakable calm of a mind that knows its own sovereignty. Are you rushing things that take time or delaying urgent acts? This paradox sits at the heart of Stoic time management, what we might call the Titan's urgent patience. The Stoics mastered a unique rhythm, acting with the fierce immediacy of someone who knows life is short, while maintaining the steady hand of someone playing the long game. Seneca captured this duality perfectly. Life is long if you know how to use it, not by cramming more hours into the day, but by distinguishing between what demands fire and what requires fermentation. Consider 2 farmers. One digs up his seeds daily to check their progress, starving them of the darkness they need to sprout. The other ignores weeds until they choke his crops. Both fail for opposite reasons. Stoic time management is the art of knowing when to wield the scalpel and when to let nature take its course. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this as emperor, handling battlefield dispatches with same-day decisiveness while allowing years for philosophical study to bear fruit. The modern equivalent, a startup founder who ships minimum viable products weekly but nurtures a 10-year vision like an oak sapling. Think of your own life. Where are you impatiently tugging at seedlings, perhaps obsessing over early metrics in a new project, or demanding instant transformation from a fledgling habit? And where are you neglecting the weeds, putting off tough conversations, avoiding skill gaps, or tolerating energy drains? The Stoic solution lies in Seneca's twin disciplines. Begin at once for what matters now, and persist without exception for what matures slowly. Here's your audit. List one task you've been approaching with unnecessary haste, maybe rushing creative work to meet artificial deadlines or forcing a relationship milestone. Then name one you've been avoiding: a health checkup, a financial review, that email burning a hole in your draft folder. For the first, ask, would better results come from giving this more breathing room? For the second, what small action could I take today to honor its urgency? Time mastery isn't about speed or slowness. It's about matching your tempo to the task's true nature. The Titan's secret is treating minutes like gold coins, spending each one with deliberate intention. What if your current struggle isn't just a random setback, but the universe handing you a PhD in resilience? The Stoics didn't see challenges as punishments. They saw them as exams designed to reveal and refine what you're truly made of. Epictetus put it bluntly: difficulties show men what they are. Not to break them, but to forge them. Think of a blacksmith's hammer. To the untrained eye, it's just brutal force. But in skilled hands, every strike shapes the metal into something stronger, sharper, more valuable. Your trials work the same way. They're not here to crush you, but to sculpt the unshakable version of yourself that's been waiting beneath the surface. Consider J.K. Rowling's 12 rejections before a publisher finally took a chance on Harry Potter. Most would have seen those letters as proof they weren't cut out for writing. But Rowling, she later called those rejections her rock bottom, the very foundation that forced her to dig deeper, to hone her craft with nothing left to lose. That's the Stoic test in action. When the world says no, you don't hear a verdict, you hear a question. How badly do you want this? Every no became a brick in her resilience, building the mental fortress that would later weather global fame storms. Here's the twist: the universe doesn't give you tests you're doomed to fail. It tailors them to the exact edges of your current capacity, pushing you just beyond what you think you can handle. A marathon runner doesn't start with 26 miles. They build with shorter races. Your struggles are no different. That financial strain, it's training you in resourcefulness. That heartbreak, it's expanding your emotional intelligence. Even failure itself is just feedback, a cosmic report card showing where to level up. So here's your challenge. Name your current Stoic test out loud. Is it a health battle, a creative block, a relationship on the rocks? Now, flip the script. What if this exact challenge was custom designed to strengthen a muscle you didn't know needed work? Maybe that anxiety is teaching you presence. Maybe that career stall is forcing you to innovate. The Stoics knew something modern science confirms. The stories we tell about our struggles determine whether they break us or build us. Tonight, try this ritual. Write down your test, then beneath it, answer, what is this here to teach me? Not with vague platitudes, but concrete insights. This loneliness is showing me where I've neglected self-connection. Or, this project failure is revealing gaps in my preparation. Because when you stop seeing life as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something that happens for you, every setback becomes a setup for a comeback. That's not optimism, it's alchemy, and it's how ordinary people transform into titans. Marcus Aurelius once scribbled in his journal a truth so simple it stings: very little is needed to make a happy life. Not mountains of wealth or endless accolades, just the discipline to stop scattering your attention like coins in a marketplace. The Titan's greatest weapon isn't brute force. It's the razor-sharp ability to distinguish between what deserves their focus and what's merely noise. Seneca saw through our modern obsession with busyness, calling it a form of laziness, not doing what truly matters. Think about that. Running in circles feels productive until you realize you're still standing in the same spot. Warren Buffett mastered this selective focus with his infamous not-to-do list strategy. When his pilot once asked how to achieve success, Buffett didn't lecture on stock picks. He had him write down 25 career goals, then circle just 5. The other 20, Buffett said, avoid them at all costs. They're not distractions, they're ambition killers. That's Stoic discernment in modern terms. Every yes to trivia is a no to your legacy. Consider how often we let digital trivia hijack our days. The average person checks their phone 96 times daily. That's once every 10 minutes. Now imagine applying Buffett's ruthlessness to your attention. What if you treated your focus like a finite currency, investing it only in ventures that compound over time? The Stoics didn't just avoid distractions, they cultivated what psychologist William James called the art of wise omission. Here's your challenge today. Audit 1 hour of your typical day like a forensic accountant. How many minutes were spent on what truly aligns with your purpose, that podcast nurturing your growth? Keep it, that endless scroll through outrage bait headlines, that's mental junk food. Start small, eliminate just one meaningless habit this week. Maybe it's checking emails first thing in the morning, a proven focus wrecker, or attending meetings that could be summarized in 2 sentences. Each time you resist trivia's pull, you're not just saving minutes, you're reclaiming sovereignty over your life's narrative. The modern world will always offer more shiny objects than you can chase. The Titan's edge comes from knowing most of them are fool's gold. Your power grows not by doing more, but by protecting what's essential with the ferocity of a lion guarding its den. Because in the end, a life well lived isn't measured by how much you touched, but by how deeply you impacted what mattered. Marcus Aurelius held more power than nearly any human in history, absolute rule over the Roman Empire at its peak. Yet his private journals reveal a leader tormented not by enemies or political schemes, but by his own potential for corruption. See that you don't become Caesarified, he warned himself, died with the purple stain. That phrase captures the essence of Stoic leadership, wielding power without being poisoned by it. While lesser rulers used their position for personal glory, Aurelius saw leadership as a sacred responsibility, writing, "The true worth of a man is measured by the objects he pursues." His reign wasn't about expanding his ego, but about serving justice with the precision of a philosopher and the humility of a public servant. Stoic leadership rests on 4 unshakable pillars. First, justice, treating every team member, from interns to executives, with equal dignity. Aurelius insisted, "What injures the hive injures the bee." Second, temperance, resisting the intoxicating lure of excess. While Roman emperors famously indulged in decadence, he slept on a simple camp bed and ate the same rations as his soldiers. Third, courage, making unpopular decisions when they align with principle. When senators urged him to execute rivals, he instead invited them to debate in open forums. Finally, wisdom, recognizing that true authority comes from reason, not title. You've been given the rank of emperor, he reminded himself. Now prove you deserve it. Modern Silicon Valley could learn from a CEO like Sarah, who transformed her struggling tech firm by applying these principles. Facing plummeting morale, she didn't resort to layoffs or hollow pep talks. Instead, she implemented Stoic virtue rounds, weekly meetings where teams discussed not just metrics, but how decisions aligned with justice and wisdom. When funds ran low, she cut her seven-figure salary before reducing staff benefits. The result, within 18 months, voluntary turnover dropped by 60% and innovation soared. As Aurelius observed, men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them then, or bear with them. Here's the question that separates ego-driven leaders from Stoic ones. How would you lead if every action were broadcast on live television to your children? Would you still play favorites, take shortcuts, or silence dissent? The test isn't whether people fear you, but whether they grow under you. Aurelius left no monuments to himself, just a tattered journal filled with reminders to be like the cliff against which waves continually break, yet stands firm while the waters retreat. That's the Titan's leadership style, not dominating the storm, but remaining unshaken within it. The ancient Stoics didn't just train their minds in dusty libraries. They sweated, strained, and pushed their bodies to the limit, knowing physical discipline was the forge where mental resilience was tempered. Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates, put it bluntly: how could a mind stay healthy in a neglected body? He wasn't advocating for vanity or athletic glory, but recognizing a profound truth: every drop of sweat is liquid courage for the soul. When you master discomfort in the gym, you're not just building muscle, you're rehearsing for life's inevitable storms. Consider Navy SEAL during Hell Week, where candidates go 5.5 days with barely 4 hours of sleep total. The ones who make it aren't the strongest or fastest, they're the ones who have learned to separate physical agony from mental surrender, their secret weapon. Stoic principles disguised as military training. When your body screams to quit and you keep moving anyway, you're not just completing a drill, you're proving to yourself that pain is a signal, not a sentence. That's why the Stoics treated exercise like philosophy in motion. Marcus Aurelius, despite his frail health, trained in wrestling and boxing not to win medals, but to cultivate what he called the discipline of ascent, the ability to choose your response when every fiber begs you to stop. Here's the modern application. Physical challenges are mental dress rehearsals. That runner's high when you push past the wall. It's biochemical proof you can outlast your own doubts. The burn in your muscles during those last few reps, that's your willpower getting stronger, not just your biceps. Even something as simple as taking the stairs instead of the elevator is a vote for your future self. A small but potent reminder that comfort is optional and growth is deliberate. So here's your Stoic fitness challenge. For the next 7 days, choose one physical act that makes you slightly uncomfortable. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes early for a brisk walk, doing push-ups until your arms tremble, or holding a plank while reciting your purpose aloud. The goal isn't to set records, it's to create a feedback loop between body and mind. Because when you teach your muscles to endure, you're teaching your character the same lesson. And that's how ordinary people build the kind of resilience that doesn't just survive storms, it dances in the rain. Cato the Younger, one of Rome's most uncompromising Stoics, once stood before the Senate to correct a trivial accounting error, a miscalculation so small most politicians would have brushed it aside. But not Cato. He interrupted proceedings to publicly admit his mistake, stating, "I would rather be right than consistent." That moment crystallizes the Stoic apology, not as weakness, but as the ultimate display of strength. The Titan's courage isn't just in standing firm, it's in bending when truth demands it. Seneca saw this radical honesty as the hallmark of growth. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials, especially those of his own making. Modern leadership often mistakes infallibility for authority, but history remembers leaders like Abraham Lincoln, who openly reversed poor decisions, or Nas a Jean Krantz, who took full responsibility for the Apollo 1 fire before rebuilding the program. Contrast this with executives who bury failures until they explode into scandals. The Stoic distinction is clear. True power comes from aligning with reality, not defending ego. A tech CEO client of mine transformed his company's culture by modeling this after a product failure. Instead of blaming his team, he gathered them and said, "I underestimated the market's readiness. Here's how we'll fix it. Trust didn't erode, it deepened. Here's why this works neurologically. When leaders admit faults, they trigger mirror neurons in their teams, fostering psychological safety." A Harvard study found teams with error-admitting leaders innovate 30% more. The Stoics knew this intuitively, that humility isn't self-deprecation, it's the steel spine of accountability. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." Your turn. Reflect on one past oversight, perhaps a snapped remark you dismissed as stress, or a project delay you blamed on circumstances. Now apply the Stoic triage. First, separate the error from your identity. You're not flawed. Your action was. Second, identify one person who'd benefit from hearing, "I was wrong about." Here's how I'll improve, because in the end, titans aren't measured by their perfection, but by their willingness to polish their rough edges publicly, unflinchingly, and with the quiet confidence of those who know growth is a lifelong excavation. Ask, could you lose everything tomorrow and still be whole? The Stoics posed this radical question not to predict doom, but to expose our silent attachments, the invisible chains we mistake for security. Epictetus cut to the heart of it. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Notice he didn't condemn riches, he redefined them. A Stoic Titan doesn't reject prosperity. They master it like a sailor who enjoys the wind's power without depending on its direction. Consider Zeno, the merchant-turned-philosopher who founded Stoicism. After losing his entire fortune in a shipwreck, he didn't crumble, he pivoted. Teaching philosophy in Athens' Stoa Poikile, he lived on lentils and spring water, yet students flocked to him. Why? Because his true wealth radiated from within. Modern parallels abound. The tech CEO who donates 90% of her shares to fund education, or the artist who trades gallery shows for community murals. Their power lies not in what they own, but in their freedom to let go. Here's the Stoic litmus test for wealth. Does it expand your capabilities to serve, or shrink your peace to maintain? Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire yet wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes? Replace anger with greed and the lesson holds." A billionaire hoarding art acquires not beauty but inventory. Meanwhile, a teacher with modest means who funds a student's textbook, that's prosperity in action, resources flowing toward virtue. Try this tonight. List 3 possessions you believe define your security. Now, imagine returning home to find them gone, not destroyed, just vanished, as if they never existed. What feelings arise? Panic suggests attachment. Calm reveals mastery. The Stoic aim isn't poverty, but what Seneca called the middle ground, enough to lift others without being weighed down by excess. Because true abundance isn't measured by what fills your accounts, but by what empties your fears. Cato the Younger stood before the Roman Senate, not to deliver a grand speech or announce a new conquest, but to correct a single misplaced digit in a financial report. Most politicians would have let such a trivial error slide, but Cato, a Stoic through and through, interrupted proceedings to declare, "I would rather be right than consistent." That moment wasn't just about accounting, it was a masterclass in the paradox of power. True strength, the Stoics taught, isn't found in never stumbling, but in how publicly and purposefully you rise after the fall. Seneca put it plainly, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials, especially those of his own making. Think of a diamond's brilliance, it's not born flawless. It's chiseled, ground, and buffed until its imperfections become facets that catch the light. The same applies to character. Modern leaders often confuse authority with infallibility, clinging to mistakes like sinking ships. But history remembers those who wielded humility as a weapon. Abraham Lincoln reversing his stance on emancipation when evidence demanded it, or Gene Kranz taking full responsibility for the Apollo 1 tragedy before leading the team to the moon. Their apologies didn't weaken their leadership, they weaponized transparency, turning faults into foundations. Consider a tech CEO who botched a product launch. Instead of blaming market conditions or his team, he gathered everyone and said, "I misjudged our timeline, here's how we'll fix it." Within weeks, morale shifted from resentment to resolve. Why? Because neuroscience confirms what the Stoics knew. Admitting errors triggers mirror neurons, fostering trust and psychological safety. A Harvard study found teams with leaders who model accountability innovate 30% more. Humility, it turns out, isn't the opposite of power, it's power refined. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled the known world, scribbled reminders to himself, "If anyone can prove me wrong, I'll gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." That's the Stoic apology in essence, not self-flagellation, but a relentless pursuit of alignment with reality. When you say, "I was wrong," you're not surrendering authority, you're claiming a higher form of it. Here's your challenge. Reflect on one oversight you've shrugged off, a harsh word dismissed as stress, a missed deadline blamed on circumstances. Now apply the Stoic triage. Separate the error from your identity. You're not flawed. Your action was. Then identify one person who deserves to hear, "I mishandled this. Here's how I'll do better." Because Titans aren't measured by their shields, but by their willingness to drop them when truth calls. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once observed that nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, to listen twice as much as we speak. This simple anatomical truth hides a profound Stoic superpower, the strategic use of silence. In a world addicted to noise, endless notifications, opinionated hot takes, and the compulsive need to fill every pause, the ability to hold your tongue becomes revolutionary. Marcus Aurelius drilled this into his nightly reflections. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Not just about actions, but words, because every unnecessary syllable is energy leaked, focus diluted, and power surrendered. Consider the master negotiator who sits across from an agitated counterpart. While others rush to fill the tension with concessions or arguments, she leans back silent. That vacuum of speech becomes a mirror, forcing the other person to confront their own demands. 9 times out of 10, they'll cave to the discomfort, revising their position just to break the quiet. It's not manipulation, it's psychology. The Stoics understood that silence isn't passive. It's the ultimate active listening, a way to absorb reality before shaping it. History's most decisive leaders shared this trait. When Julius Caesar received urgent dispatches during Senate debates, he'd read them silently while others shouted. That pause, sometimes minutes long, drove his rivals mad with uncertainty. Was he ignoring them, planning retaliation? The power lay in the unanswered space. Modern research confirms this. Teams with leaders who speak 20% less generate 30% more innovative solutions. Silence, it turns out, isn't empty. It's the fertile ground where ideas root. Here's your challenge. For one day this week, practice intentional silence, not monastic vows, just strategic pauses. When someone provokes you, count to 10 before responding. In meetings, ask one thoughtful question instead of 3 reactive opinions. Notice how often you speak out of habit rather than purpose. As Epictetus warned, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen more and talk less. Because when you stop scattering words like confetti, you start wielding them like precision tools. The Titan's edge isn't in dominating the conversation, it's in knowing when the conversation no longer serves the mission. What if your harshest critic was secretly your greatest mentor? The Stoics saw every encounter, whether with friends, rivals, or strangers, as a classroom in disguise. Epictetus turned this insight into a razor-sharp principle. If someone tells you that so and so speaks ill of you, don't defend yourself against what was said. Instead reply, he must not know my other faults, or he would have mentioned those too. That's not passive acceptance, it's the art of transforming insults into immunity training. When you stop letting others' opinions dictate your self-worth, you unlock a superpower, the ability to mine wisdom from even the most unlikely sources. Consider a professional athlete facing a trash-talking opponent. The average player might let anger cloud their focus, but a stoic competitor, they'd study their rival's moves twice as hard, using the hostility as fuel to sharpen their own game. Michael Jordan famously kept a secret list of every slight, real or imagined, to stoke his competitive fire. That's stoic mentorship in action, recognizing that friction polishes gems. Your toughest colleagues, your most demanding clients, even that neighbor who always seems to push your buttons, they're not obstacles. They're resistance training for your character. History's greatest innovators thrived on this principle. Thomas Edison didn't just dismiss Nikola Tesla's criticisms, he absorbed what served him while maintaining his vision. Steve Jobs returned to Apple after his ouster with sharper leadership skills, crediting his time in exile as his best mentor. The pattern is clear: growth doesn't happen in echo chambers. It sparks in the space between opposing forces, like flint striking steel. Here's your challenge today. Think of one person who's recently rubbed you the wrong way: a condescending coworker, a skeptical family member, an online detractor. Instead of rehearsing your rebuttals, ask, what lesson might they unknowingly be offering? Maybe their skepticism highlights areas where you need more preparation. Perhaps their arrogance mirrors a trait you've neglected in yourself. Even toxic people serve as cautionary tales, showing us versions of who we could become if left unchecked. Before sleep tonight, try this stoic ritual. Journal one sentence of gratitude for an unlikely teacher in your life. Not flowery praise, specific acknowledgement. Thank you, impatient client, for teaching me to communicate more clearly under pressure. Or, thank you, dismissive colleague, for reminding me to document my ideas thoroughly. When you start seeing mentors in unexpected places, you'll never face a truly wasted interaction again. Because the ultimate education isn't confined to classrooms. It's hidden in plain sight, waiting for those with the wisdom to recognize it. Most people chase happiness like it's a butterfly, elusive, fragile, and gone the moment you grasp it. The Stoics saw this pursuit differently. They called it eudaimonia, not the fleeting high of a dopamine hit, but the steady glow of a life aligned with nature's deepest truths. Seneca put it bluntly, true joy is a serious matter, not because Stoics were joyless, but because they discovered happiness isn't found. It's forged through the daily practice of virtue. Imagine 2 travelers. One carries an overflowing sack of treasures, constantly adding more yet always fearing loss. The other walks empty-handed, finding wonder in the path itself. That's the Titan's secret. Joy isn't accumulated, it's uncovered through how you engage with the world. Consider the minimalist who trades a cluttered mansion for a tiny home. At first, it seems like sacrifice until you notice how they savor morning light on bare walls or the weightlessness of owing nothing. This isn't deprivation, it's distillation. The Stoics recognized that joy thrives in uncluttered spaces, not just physical ones, but mental and emotional ones too. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life," while pacing the marble halls of his palace. He wasn't denying luxury's comforts, he was revealing their insignificance next to the richness of a disciplined mind. Modern science echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies on hedonic adaptation prove we quickly return to baseline happiness after both windfalls and losses. That promotion, the new car, they sparkle briefly, then fade into the background. But the joy of acting with integrity during a tough negotiation, the quiet pride of keeping your temper when provoked, those don't dim, they compound. A teacher who stays late to help a struggling student won't find that moment on a pleasure scale, yet it nourishes in ways no tropical vacation can replicate. Here's your challenge today. Recall one act from this week that felt virtuous. Maybe you listened instead of interrupting, or chose honesty when a lie would have been easier. Hold that moment in your mind like a philosopher examining a gem. Notice how it lands differently than, say, scrolling social media or indulging dessert. That distinction is your compass, because Stoic joy isn't about renouncing worldly pleasures. It's about anchoring to something deeper, when your happiness depends not on what happens to you, but on who you choose to become in each moment. You've discovered the Titan's most enduring power, the ability to carry your sunshine within. Socrates sipped the hemlock as if it were evening tea, turning his final moments into a masterclass on how to exit life with quiet dignity. While his disciples wept, he used his dying breath to debate philosophy, proving that the way we face death ultimately reveals how we've chosen to live. The Stoics took this further, not just accepting mortality, but wielding it as a whetstone to sharpen their days. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "Death smiles at us all. All we can do is smile back, not as surrender, but as recognition. This inevitable end is what makes our fleeting hours precious." Consider the hospice nurse who shared her most profound lesson from the dying. No one regrets working less or accumulating more stuff. Their final reflections always orbit the same truths: love expressed too sparingly, adventures postponed for someday, and the quiet moments mistaken for insignificant. One patient's last words, "I wish I'd given myself permission to be happy while I was waiting for perfect." That's Stoic death contemplation in action, not morbid fixation, but a lens that strips away life's illusions. History's most vibrant lives were often sculpted by death's proximity. Steve Jobs famously said remembering he'd be dead soon became his greatest tool for cutting through bullshit. The Roman Stoics practiced Memento Mori, not to dwell in gloom but to ignite urgency. When a general rode through Rome in triumphant procession, a slave whispered in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." That wasn't a curse, it was liberation from the delusion of endless time. Here's your epitaph challenge tonight. Don't reach for grand accolades or flowery prose. Write one line that captures the essence of how you want to have lived. Maybe it's, "She turned wounds into wisdom," or "He made burdens lighter." Keep it where you'll see it daily as a screensaver taped to your mirror. Because when you clarify how you want your story to land, you start living backward from that moment, pruning away anything that doesn't serve that ultimate testimony. The titans of history didn't fear death, they let it mentor them, using its inevitability to distill their days into something undiluted and true. Ask, how will the world be better for your having lived? That single question cuts through the noise of temporary achievements and asks what truly endures. The Stoics measured wealth not in gold or monuments, but in the invisible seeds of virtue they planted for generations they'd never meet. Seneca wrote, "He who plants a tree under whose shade he will never sit has understood the meaning of life." Notice he didn't praise the grand philanthropist or the conqueror. He honored the patient planter. Because real legacy isn't about carving your name in stone, but about becoming fertile soil where others take root. Consider the high school biology teacher who spent 40 years in the same classroom. She won't appear in history books, but her legacy lives in the doctor who credits her for his love of science, the environmentalist who traces her passion to that first dissected frog, even the parent who teaches their child curiosity because a teacher once modeled it for them. Impact compounds like interest silently, exponentially. Marcus Aurelius knew this when he wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity, not because actions are immortal, but because their ripple effects are." History's most enduring figures grasped this paradox. The more you focus on serving beyond your lifespan, the more timeless your influence becomes. Take Benjamin Franklin, who left small sums to Boston and Philadelphia with one condition: they couldn't be touched for 200 years. That patience transformed his modest gift into millions, funding scholarships and libraries long after his death. But here's the Stoic twist: Franklin didn't do this for posthumous praise. He did it because aligning with virtue, with what helps humanity flourish, was its own reward. Your legacy isn't a single grand gesture. It's the sum of small, consistent acts of integrity. The contractor who teaches apprentices not just to build houses, but to build them right. The nurse who treats frightened patients with dignity, shaping how they'll advocate for others. Even the stranger whose unexpected kindness becomes someone else's pay-it-forward story. These aren't footnotes, they're the quiet curriculum of human progress. Here's your challenge tonight. Light a candle and write 2 letters. The first, to your future self 10 years from now. What virtues do you want to have cultivated by then? The second, to someone you'll never meet, a descendant, a future neighbor, a stranger influenced by choices you'll forget making. Describe the intangible inheritance you hope they've received from your life's work. Not money or fame, but the values woven into your daily existence. Because when you start living as if someone centuries from now is watching, your definition of success shifts from what you accumulate to what you propagate. That's the Titan's true mark, not the footprint they leave, but the seeds they sow. Marcus Aurelius began each dawn with a ritual as precise as a general preparing for battle, not by strapping on armor, but by fortifying his mind. Before the first rays touched Rome's marble columns, he'd retreat to his private quarters, light an oil lamp, and ink his now famous journal entries. These weren't mere musings, they were tactical briefings for his soul. When you arise in the morning, he wrote, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. That deliberate pause between sleep and action wasn't idle time. It was the forge where he tempered his day's resolve. Your modern Stoic morning needn't involve parchment and quill, but it demands the same intentionality. Start with what the ancients called premeditatio malorum, a mental rehearsal of the day's potential challenges, not to dwell on worst-case scenarios, but to disarm them. Picture your commute disrupted by traffic. How will you maintain composure? Anticipate a colleague's criticism. What wisdom might it contain? This 5-minute exercise isn't pessimism, it's emotional inoculation. Epictetus captured its power. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Win the battle in your mind before stepping onto life's battlefield. Take the CEO who swears by her 5 a.m. Stoic triad. First, she drinks a glass of water, not for hydration, but to practice voluntary discomfort, reminding herself that ease isn't entitlement. Next, she reviews 3 virtues she'll embody that day, perhaps patience during budget talks or courage in giving tough feedback. Finally, she visualizes one interaction where she'll listen more than speak. This ritual takes 12 minutes yet shapes her entire leadership presence. Her secret, consistency over intensity. The Stoics didn't seek grand gestures at dawn. They cultivated micro-habits that compounded into unshakable character. Now your turn. Choose one Stoic lever to pull tomorrow morning. Maybe it's leaving your phone untouched for the first 30 minutes, creating space for reflection instead of reaction. Or perhaps it's writing 2 sentences in a journal, one gratitude, one intention, as Marcus did. Even something as simple as stepping outside barefoot to feel the earth beneath your feet, connecting to the present like Seneca walking his morning gardens. The goal isn't to mimic ancient rituals, but to distill their essence, starting each day not as a passive recipient of chaos, but as the author of your response. When you claim those first quiet moments with purpose, you don't just prepare for the day, you shape it. Seneca nailed it when he said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That gnawing anxiety about starting your business, that dread of having a tough conversation, it's almost never as catastrophic as your mind paints it. The Stoics knew a secret modern science confirms. The brain amplifies discomfort when we stall, turning molehills into mental mountains. But here's the pivot point. The moment you take action, any action, the illusion shatters. Epictetus put a blade to procrastination's throat with his challenge. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but now, because transformation isn't some distant summit. It's the next step you refuse to delay. Take Sarah, a graphic designer who spent years dreaming of freelancing but froze at the risks. One morning, she did something radical. She didn't overhaul her life. She simply emailed one client she'd been too intimidated to approach. That single send clicked something in her mind. Within months, she'd replaced her corporate salary. Was it luck? No. It was the Stoic principle of decisive initiation, the understanding that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the refusal to let it veto progress. Your turn. Identify one change you've overthought into paralysis. Maybe it's finally setting boundaries with a toxic relative or launching that side project you've researched to death. Now here's the Titan's challenge. Within the next 24 hours, take one irrevocable step, not a grand gesture, just an action that burns the boats behind you. Email the mentor you think is too important to reply. Schedule the workout class you've avoided for months. Delete the apps draining your focus. The size of the step doesn't matter, the commitment does. Because when you prove to yourself that survival lies on the other side of fear, you don't just make progress, you rewrite your relationship with resistance itself. This isn't about reckless haste. It's about recognizing that the perfect moment is a myth, and that real power comes from acting despite the imperfections. The farmer doesn't wait for all storms to pass before planting. They sow knowing some seeds will weather the rain. Your boldest life won't begin when the fear disappears. It begins the instant you decide the fear no longer gets a vote. Let's crystallize the Stoic path you've walked today. First, resilience, that unshakable core that turns obstacles into fuel, just as fire tempers steel. Then perspective, the lens that transforms setbacks into setups, proving Marcus Aurelius right when he said, "The impediment becomes the way." And finally, action, because wisdom without application is like a sword never drawn. It may gleam, but it won't cut through life's chaos. These aren't just ideas, they're muscles waiting to be flexed daily. Think of the blacksmith who doesn't marvel at his tools, he uses them. strike after strike, until mastery feels like second nature. Now, here's the truth about Titanic success. It's not a distant summit you reach in one heroic climb. It's the sum of small, deliberate choices, the cold shower you take when you'd rather hit snooze, the deep breath you draw before responding to criticism, the journal entry you scribble at night to sharpen tomorrow's focus. Every time you choose principle over impulse, you're not just practicing Stoicism, you're etching it into your bones. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for this journey. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That power isn't reserved for emperors or philosophers. It's in your hands right now, waiting to be wielded. So tell me in the comments which principle struck a chord today. Was it the mental fortress of resilience, the liberation of perspective, or the momentum of action? Your answer is the first step toward making these ideas your own. If this resonated with you, don't let the momentum fade here. Hit subscribe and join a community turning ancient wisdom into modern mastery. Every new video is another tool for your kit, another way to refine your mindset, sharpen your discipline, and rise as the Titan you're meant to be. The path doesn't end here, it begins. Your next level of Stoic transformation is waiting.